Hi everyone, I'm Luke Hector from the Broken Meeple and welcome to another Express review talking quickly about a game called Cascadia. This is from Alderac Entertainment Group as well as Flat Out Games, and if you are aware of Flat Out Games' previous title, Calico, you'll get a certain idea as to what this game's kind of all about. This is almost feel like a pseudo-sequel to that one. Calico, or Calico, depending on how you pronounce it, was essentially a little tile-laying game where you had little hexes, you placed them on your board to build a quilt, and with the patterns that you were trying to assemble, you scored points and you got cat tokens to put on there. It was a nice, light, fluffy game, but to me, it felt too chaotic at 3 to 4 players. There was not enough choice as to what tiles you could grab. It was literally like a display of only 3 tiles and that was it. And it just felt more like a push-your-luck game than any kind of real skill, that is. I mean, it's not a bad game, but it just wasn't really for me. This one, I was kind of like, well, okay, are you just going to repeat the same problems again, or is it kind of an improvement? So, in Cascadia, you are building a nature reserve park. You start off with a 3-pronged hex token like this, and essentially, as the game goes, you have a display of 4 tiles, along with 4 of these animal tokens, and what you do is you effectively pick one of those. So if I can lay a few out here like so, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, you essentially decide, which one of these ones do I want to pick? I quite like the fox with this green tile here. I'll take this one. And then you plug it onto your grid, you put the token, the animal token, where it's allowed to go. It's printed on the tile, and you'll score points based on a bunch of criteria that is set at the start of the game. These cards basically enable you to score for the 5 different creature types: salmon, elk, fox, hawk, and bear, in different ways. There's 4 for each, or you can take a family variant with like 2 levels of difficulty, which allow you to basically change up the game in various ways. But that's essentially the crux of the game. You basically choose a column, take the tile, put it on your board, and you just keep going in that fashion until eventually you run out of tiles and the game ends and you start scoring up. Additionally, you can collect these little pinecone tokens which effectively allow you to chop and change how you choose the tiles. So rather than taking a specific column, you could instead take, well, you know what, I want the token from this one here and the tile from that one there. So you can kind of mix and match, and it's definitely worth using those while you can. When you get to the end of the game, as I said, you will score based on these cards, depending on what's out, but you'll also score based on terrain. So all of these tiles have got all the different types of terrain, like mountain and river and forest and plains and desert. I don't think I've missed any out there. And basically, you're not restricted as to how you place them on your board, but the bigger a group of the same terrain you can make, the more points you get. You score a point for every tile that represents your biggest group of a type of terrain, and there's bonus points for having the most compared to other players. So there's quite a decent amount of scoring, and you do get a pretty long score pad to deal with it all, but it's relatively straightforward maths. You've just got to take it one step at a time. Go through each of the animals, then go through each of the terrain, leftover pine tokens, total it up, player wins. Nice and simple. So I can see why you're probably getting Calico vibes from this. It definitely is that same type of game. It's like, here's your grid, build it up with tiles, score points for various means. Except in this case, the points will score very differently between games, whereas in Calico they were kind of similar. It was mainly just, do I want to get like 3 types of 2? Do I want to get 2 types of 3 or whatever? This one, they're pretty different among the different animal types. Like for example here, let's see, the fox is all about pairs, so you know, a fox next to different pairs of animals scores. Hawks like to be not adjacent to each other, but they like to be within line of sight to each other. Bears like to be in a group, but in this particular card's case you can't have any bears surrounding it, so they've got to be separate groups. Elk like to be in various patterns and shapes, and then the salmon generally like to be in kind of like a continuous run without being grouped together. After all, it's salmon swimming up a river. So 4 for each animal, and here's a top tip actually. The card quality is a little bit on the flimsy side. Get some sleeves, particularly these sleeve kings that I use, get the size and double them. So put 2 of the 4 scoring cards in each sleeve back to back, and basically half the sleeves, and you can get them nice and covered and nice and secure. Definitely a top tip for you. But when we're on the subject of aesthetics, this is a beautiful game. This is lovely and cute. I mean, it's Beth Sobel. Need I say more? If you know this name in the artistry world, you know that anything she draws is gorgeous. And here, it's the same deal, although you don't get as much of it as you might want. You know, the terrain on these tiles is nice and colourful, but frankly, anybody could have drawn these bits. I mean, you know, it's just different colour terrain. Mainly where Beth Sobel's artwork is coming from is the animal tokens themselves, although again, you know, simplistic. It's mainly from these cards. And there's only so many of them, you only have 5 of them showing in the game. Yes, beautiful artwork, but that's kind of all the artwork. The rest of it is all on the box, which granted, it's a beautiful box. I mean, if I saw this on the shelf, I would definitely pick it up and check it, and it certainly does catch the eye of anybody walking by, but yeah, I mean, the artwork is there, it's just not like abundant everywhere. It's just very colourful though. Very colourful, very pretty, and the component quality, other than the flimsy linen cards, which I do think are a little bit on the flimsy side, the rest of it is all pretty good. I mean, it's a good score pad, you've got a nice, like, you know, kind of like felt drawer bag for the tokens. You've got lots of fairly chunky, not overly chunky, but decent quality tiles for all that. You know, they feel good, they're not going to bend, they're not going to warp, they should be pretty good. And of course you've got a lot of these different little sort of mini wooden tokens with the artwork printed on them for the various animals. So yeah, it definitely is solid in terms of production quality. So I mentioned 1 to 4 players. Does this have the same problem that Calico had? Not quite the same problem, but it does have its own problem. This is a game that you really want to play ideally with solo or 2 players. Not to say that this game breaks at 3 or 4 players. Like, I don't want to play Calico at all with 3 or 4 players. It's just too chaotic with that display. Here you've got 4 separate columns, and yes, it gets more chaotic as you increase the player count, because by the time it gets around to your turn, it's going to look completely different from the next time. But it's not quite that bad. You should still have a decent amount of choice there, particularly if you're collecting some of these pinecone tokens, of which you collect them by placing animals on particular tiles that have the pinecone symbol on them. You know, so you shouldn't get caught in a situation where there's nothing that you can use. It's just whether the perfect thing came out for you. But the problem with having 3 or 4 players is that this game is very multiplayer solitaire. There's only one reason you care about the other players being there, and that is the bonus points for the terrain types. That's it. But you get that experience with 2 players, you don't desperately need 3 and 4 players to make that work. And again, you can't necessarily hate draft as much with 3 or 4 players. I mean, I can't look at the person who's to the right of me and go, oh, you want one of those, maybe I should take this one. Well, no, because there's 2 other players to act before them, and you've got to worry about your own thing. You can't worry about every other player. At most, you'll worry about the player who's after you, and even then, most of the time, it's better just to take what you need rather than hate draft in this game. But when you have only 2 of you, it's a little bit simpler to do that. You've only got 1 land to look at, and so I can go, I can quickly tell all the terrain types, I can quickly tell which animals you need. You know what, this column's probably a good one to nick off you. Definitely a very good 2-player experience. With 3 or 4, it's a nice game, but you're kind of just doing your own thing and not really caring what the others are there for. The game doesn't take too long though. I mean, it should take you no longer than 45 minutes to play through a game, even at 4 players. With 2 or 3 of you, you can zoom through this like crazy. I mean, it's almost fiddle length. Not quite, I don't know. 30 minutes is doable with 2 players. You're probably looking at 45 minutes after that. But like I say, it's still a pretty short game that you can get done quick. And certainly if you play it solo, you should be looking at a good 30 minutes to do it. The solo mode is very straightforward. It's basically the same as the multiplayer game, except with the columns of tiles that you take with the tokens. All that happens is when you take a particular set, the one at the far right auto scraps and goes out of the game, and you slide them down, and that's your new set. That's it. But that's the only change from multiplayer. So, as I say, this game does feel more like a solo puzzle. But it's a good solo puzzle. This rulebook, besides being incredibly easy to learn the game, I mean, this is definitely one I recommend for game cafes. Anybody who's never seen this game before could pick it up and learn it from the rules in about 5 to 10 minutes. It's really straightforward with clear font, good pictorial examples. I had no problems with any of the rules in this game, no mistakes, it was a breeze. But the solo mode is, again, very clearly explained, and if you want to make it super simple, you can always play the family variant, which basically gives you 1 scoring card that basically just says group animals up. Who cares what the animal is? Like I say, you want to make it dirt simple, then by all means use it. Personally, I never have, but what makes the solo mode really cool is these solo scenarios at the back of the book. Now, there is a bit on achievements, which is, I hate this when you put it in board games. This whole thing of like, well, let's see, if you scored at least this many points, you get to cross a mark off. You scored at least this much wildlife, you get to cross off a mark. Does anybody play this game with these achievements? Honestly, I mean, if that's the thing you like, fair enough. But personally, I just find this to be a waste of print. But these, on the other hand, different story. The scenarios at the back, you've got 15 of them, and they basically tell you what combination of cards to use for scoring, but also give you a limit of how many points you must get minimum to succeed, and some other restrictions like you've got to have all 5 animals, you can't have water next to forest, you can't have bears next to elk, that kind of thing. And you work through them a bit like the system in The Crew, where they've got all those different scenarios, they progress in difficulty, and you just try and complete them. But these make for a very good, interesting solo game, because it's not just simply, oh, I just see how many points I've got. Yes, that's in there, but I don't care about point trials. I'm more interested in succeeding a scenario. So doing these gives you a good amount of like tactical decision making that you got to do, because it's like, normally I would want to take that salmon, but I can't put the salmon next to the bear because the bears eat the salmon. Therefore, where can I put it? Should I maybe skip it this time? I don't know, stupid scenario. And it works really well. It's just a neat, simple addition, but it really elevates the solo mode to the point where I would actually recommend this highly for solo gamers more than multiplayer gamers. I believe you can actually throw these into multiplayer as well, but I don't know. I don't see it working as well as a multiplayer thing. But like I say, it's there, so if you want to do it, you're more than welcome to. So Cascadia is nothing overly new. It's not the most original game out there. In fact, it's not original one way or the other, but it's cute, it's light, zen-like even. It's pretty, it's easy to play, it's suitable for families and gateway gamers. It's definitely a game I would recommend for cafes and anybody starting off into the hobby. It's got a lot of good things going for it. Honestly, the main thing, other than its lack of originality, is more that it's not the best at 3 and 4 players compared to, say, 1 and 2. I mean, if this was on the table and there was 3 or 4 of us, I'd probably still play it, but I'd be like, I don't know, is there anything else we could do with 3 or 4? But solo, I like to bring this out in just 30 minutes, you know, quick setup, just choose my scenario, get the 5 cards out, here's the tokens, go. And in 30 minutes I've plonked out a nice addictive puzzle game in a box that's not overly large. I mean, this is not the most portable game in the world, but compared to something like this, yeah, pretty straightforward. As I say, there's a lot going for it, it's just very nice, attractive little game. So I'm giving Cascadia a strong 8 out of 10 overall. A still endorsement, not quite distinction level. As I say, we've seen this kind of thing before. It scales better at lower player counts. And yes, there is going to be some luck factor with what tiles come out of the bag and what tiles appear, but not quite as bad as what Calico had. But it's still really, really solid. I recommend it. I'm definitely going to hang on to this one. I'm going to teach it to my family at Christmas. I look forward to seeing how that turns out. But yeah, well done. Very nice, attractive game. So that's it for me on this Broken Meeple review. If you like what you see, please remember to leave a thumbs up and a comment. Let me know what you think of Cascadia. Do you prefer it to Calico? Do you even compare the two? Which one does better for you if you taught it to families with success? Any scenarios that you think are particularly easy or particularly insanely hard, you know, that you want me to try? By all means, let me know. I like to engage with you. Until next time, you can check out more content on the channel, including my Top 100 series, or you can check out a recent review I did for a light economic game called Mobile Markets from Arcane Wonders. So that's it for me. Take care, and remember, as always, it's only a game. Bye for now, everyone.